Hopefully when people look at my work, there's a sense of meditation or stillness, or depending the opposite of that, hopefully a little bit of frustration. Depending on what the work is, I hope for different feelings, but overall I hope it inspires them. I hope it challenges them in some sense. But I hope people find pleasure and some beauty in it overall. I'm Nathan Westerman. I'm a mixed media artist. You know, I'd watch my dad draw things, like, it's kind of funny, but for like a fill day, I think we were the tractors when I was like in kindergarten, and I watched my dad draw a tractor on my field day shirt, and that I think really kind of turned me on to drawing. I think I first started making art in junior high. I would consider that real art. I had a great high school art teacher, and she really turned me on to a lot of art history and art making practices. She was very influential. I think I prefer wood. I work best in wood. I do like video. I like the immediacy of video. I remember in grad school working, doing a lot of video and photography, and I'd be on my way to the studio and come up with an idea, and you could just turn back around, go grab the camera, and make the art instantly in the studio. I like that. But I think with wood, you have to slow down. With paint, wooden paint, you have to slow down a little bit. Especially the way I work, I make a process out of it. So it's much slower. It allows time for thought, but I think that's my favorite medium. As an artist, I do have a day job, and I go to that job, 7 to 4, and my job from 5 to 10 is making art. So that can look like anything from cleaning the studio and staring at things for hours to coating plywood with paint or sanding something, 4 hours of sanding and wood spackling and then sanding some more. So everything I do is very process oriented. So each day could look like a different part of the process, but I do enjoy every part of the process, and going to work and then coming home is all part of that. All my paint is found. I don't mix my paint, so it's pre-mixed gallons of paint that should be discarded, and so I use those colors as found colors. So that determines the paint color. Then I paint it on wood that has distress or blemishes in them, and so I usually cut around those, and that kind of determines the length of the material, and then I cut it into strips and into slats and assemble it as a painting. The composition comes from, I'm thinking about language. I'm a drummer, so I think about music and patterns in that sense, and I don't know, just a lot of intuition, and a lot of times just trying not to think about anything, just kind of clearing my mind and thinking about the color and the pattern and kind of the purity of what that is. So the curve drawings are sections of walls from the Cranard Art Museum that I salvaged and then ran over the table saw, cutting thin lines, just allowing the blade to penetrate the surface of the wall. And with 20 years of paint on the walls, there's layers and layers of different colors from different exhibitions. And I would adjust the blade and adjust the fence on the table saw and continue to run the wood or the wall section through the table saw, revealing different layers and kind of exposing history. With the slat paintings, I collect 1/4-inch plywood that should be thrown away, and I find paint that is also should be discarded. Instead of it going onto a landfill, I use those and I coat layers of paint onto the plywood. Once I've got these planks of painted wood, I then run them through the table saw and cut strips. I router circles out of other discarded plywood that I've salvaged and create panels, and then I construct a composition of stripes onto the circles, and I attach them using a pneumatic nail gun and glue, and then I come back and I router the perimeter, making it a flush painting. And that's pretty much the process on that. Floor corridor was a piece where I took flooring up from the retail store that I worked at, and when I removed it, exposed tons of bugs and spider webs, and I took that flooring and I installed it in the gallery and shot 2 videos, turning the floor on its edge, standing it straight up to make a corridor. I referenced Bruce Nauman's walking contrapposto, and I walked contrapposto nude between the space, videoing it in the space. And then I laid between the 2 walls, floors, and spoke to the viewer as if I was a bug that was exposed by the flooring being lifted up, but also it was speaking to the viewer as a piece of artwork, and that I needed the viewer to complete the artwork in the viewing process. I also pulled from Vito Acconci's theme song, one of my favorite pieces by Vito Acconci with that work, where he's laying on the floor and playing tape cassettes and smoking cigarettes and talking directly to the viewer, and singing some of these love songs to the viewer. Self-portrait as a museum guard is shot directly in the location in the museum. I used Cranard Art Museum guard attire and dressed up, and I'm reading a book called About Looking, which is referencing looking, returning the gaze, and I'm peeking right up out of the book back at the viewer as if you caught me reading something a security guard shouldn't be doing, is reading a book on the job. And so returning that glance back at the viewer, and the site in the museum, it was hung in the spot that it was photographed, so you would see like the, maybe blemishes in the wood floor you would also see in the photograph. So it was kind of like a stand-in, a prop for that experience. Really repulsive and very vulnerable was a video I shot in 2002, and it was one of those pieces where I was driving to the studio and I turned around when I grabbed my video camera and took it back to the studio with me, and I grabbed 2 shirts, one red, one green, really repulsive, wore the red t-shirt, and very vulnerable. Wore the green button-up shirts, and I just set the camera on myself and pulled up a chair and repeated the lines, "I'm really repulsive, he's very vulnerable, I'm really, really repulsive," over and over, and then repeated, "I'm very vulnerable, he's really repulsive," and kind of like a Brady Bunch style of pointing fingers at each other, and this kind of passive-aggressive kind of argument between really repulsive and very vulnerable. Up the short shots is a set of 4 photos that go into the corner. So the corner becomes like a crotch, and it sets the viewer up as a voyeur, whether they want it to be or not, much as like being exposed to looking up someone's shorts. Unintentionally, it's this sort of glimpse that you see something and you want to look away. I'm interested in that kind of accidental voyeurism that occurs in that instance. I've made work that's like 5 foot by 10 foot before, but you really, I'm working within restraints of being able to fit into a vehicle and move it. And also I made in the past, I made work that was really large and really had trouble finding homes for it. So I think at this point, I'm working small to a medium-large format for the time being right now. I hope everyone's my audience. I try to make work that's accessible, that anyone can relate to on some level. Hopefully, I think good art works like an onion. You can peel it back and get deeper and deeper. So hopefully everyone's my audience. That's what I hope to reach. I hope to focus much more on art making than I have in the past 10 years. I'm taking jobs to focus more on art, less on the work, and so I'm looking forward to making much more work and being much more active as an artist.